Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about back training. And this is one of my favorite topics, and it's funny that it's one of my favorite topics because I consider it to be a really uncomplicated topic. And again, I'm one of these people that, even though my training has been geared towards strength, far less than caring about appearance or any of that, I tend to have pretty good back development, you know. Don't have the best back in the game, but it's definitely there. Of course, I've got still those love handles and loose skin, which I'm slowly trying to burn off from my previous weight loss. But I've got pretty good back development. It seems like I always have people who come in my comments and they'll see me do certain exercises and they're like, "Oh, your back training sucks," but then they have no back. And you'll see people who will try to come up with these really complicated methods, like, "Oh, you have to squeeze your back at the top." Right? It's all about squeezing and contracting, or it's all about aligning the fibers correctly, and it's just so ridiculous because, when you look at that, what are the two things we're really looking at for our overall back development? Because again, lats and traps and things often do tend to work together. They tend to work together. Right? You're looking at it either stretching or you're looking at contracting those muscles. Right? That is not particularly complicated. For stretching them, obviously we need movements to where our scapula spread apart. We load things under a stretch. It can be vertical pulls, it can be horizontal pulls. I focused on different ones at different points in my training career and have honestly found both of them to work. I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. I think vertical pulls do tend to work a little more lat and less trap and upper back, and I think horizontal pulls tend to work a little more upper back and trap and a little less lat. But at the end of the day, they both bring a lot to the table. You could technically focus on one for the majority of your work and still have pretty good back development, right? The main thing we're looking at is can we get the back stretched, right? Can we stretch the lats out? That's what we're looking at there, stretching the lats. Is it a good idea if you want the most back development possible? Not just good back development, okay? Because a lot of the guys who are doing this stuff don't even have good back development, right? They don't even have good back development. But if you really want the most possible, obviously it would make sense to utilize both. I'm not saying you have to have good back development. I think you could have good back development entirely focusing on just one. You're going to have more if you do both. It's going to be a little more complete. But the thing that you're looking at is putting the muscles of the back into a stretch position within the limits of your range of motion. Now, I've filmed this when I was just now able to do some rehab work that I've been working on my shoulder mobility to even be able to do chins again. So they're going to improve. So this is probably going to be old footage by the time this comes out. All right. But, same thing with the rowing. These are rows that let me get into a stretch position, even though I've oftentimes used rows off the floor that don't do it as much, still got good back development. So I want to be clear, it's not always necessary, but you can probably get a little more if you do stuff that puts you into a stretch position. Again, it's are you chasing good or are you chasing optimal? And I'm not saying you have to do optimal. Again, just to be clear here. All right, so you have stretch positions, and we have this whole argument of isometrics. And this is where I think deadlifting comes in, right? Because all these people will talk about, well, we need to contract the scapula together and then all of this stuff. We have to contract them and squeeze them. But then they're doing it with a lightweight, right? They're doing it on a small exercise, and quite frankly, that oftentimes they're detracting from the stretch to do it. But I would say, well, what's wrong with deadlifts? In this case, deficit deadlifts. What's wrong with deadlifts for doing that? Don't they do a better job of doing that technically? Aren't you loading a lot more weight into that position? I mean, the point we're going to make, those contracted positions, as much light as people make of them, they're honestly are positioned to where we're stronger. The weights that are challenging at the bottom of those are oftentimes not as challenging at the top for those muscles involved. Right, that isometric strength. if you're going to care about that isometric and squeeze, deadlifts make a lot more sense to me. Okay? I also feel they bring a lot to the table for traps, because we come back over to stretch. Well, they stretch overload the traps quite a bit. Okay? And again, a lot of people say, well, farmers walks do that. Yeah, but I don't think they do it any better. They're like, above the knee rack pulls. Yeah, but they don't do it any better. You're still kind of limited to what load the muscle's really going to take before it just becomes about your structure. But I think deadlifts do a good job there, right? They do a really good job. I think they add a more complete back development because they help with low back and everything. And again, of course, I like reverse hybrids, but I'm not going to include those for this discussion because not everyone has access, and I don't think they're necessary for overall back development. I see them as more of a health thing and honestly a little more posterior chain. Okay. Which, again, the erectors and everything do tie into that. You have the whole thoracico-lumbar sling. But here's the point I'm making with some of this. And of course I have my pullovers in here because I've been doing those, and yeah, they do stimulate the lats. But realistically, the 4 types of movements you see me doing here, if a person were to do all these correctly and progress on them, I don't think you're going to get better back development than what these movements can give you. Again, people say, but this guy over here might have more, but it could be genetics, it could be his drug stack, it could be other stuff. I'm talking purely from a stimulus side. I think this is going to do everything you're going to possibly achieve. It can be some form of pull up or chin up, right? I mean, if you're too weak, I guess lat pull downs, but shouldn't we be working on being strong enough to do pull ups and chin ups, right? Rowing. Heavy hip hinges where you hold the bar in some way. I prefer conventional deadlifts and deficit deadlifts. I'm not saying it has to be that. You know, and then stuff like the pullovers, where they really, because they add their own little unique element, right? They bring other stuff to the table while still contributing to back development. You know, but that's the point I'm making here. Just pulling from different angles. Putting your focus on this. The secret's not, oh, you have to strap up. It's like, I don't ever use straps. Very, very rarely. Oh, you have to squeeze this. You have to hit this line of pull or angle. It's always this really complicated stuff, right? Isn't it? And how often is it some trainer or influencer who quite frankly doesn't even have back development? And that's, you know, the interesting part. I've noticed a trend on that over the years. Usually the people who obsess the most over those things actually don't even have backs. And I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence. That's paralysis by analysis instead of putting in quality work. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.